Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge, or in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people.
Which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you. And we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara, life coach, wife, and mom to 4 incredible and unique children. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and confidence that once felt so lacking. I created the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves feeling trapped and with no one who really understands. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle your ability to dream. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you are a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello and welcome to the Special Needs Mom podcast. Today I'm going to start this episode with a little bit of a personal update. And then actually, this episode is going to be a rebroadcast from a blast from the past. I'll tell you all about it after I finish my introduction, but let's start with telling you a little bit about this season that we have been in. And you know what? It's been a really hard season. It's just been one of those. And I think as it continues to go on, I've been contemplating kind of calling it a hard season and helping that normalize the feelings of overwhelm and at times hopelessness and, just kind of feeling like, well, I guess the word is exhaustion from operating at capacity for a long period of time. And I know the season will end. I know that we will move past, it will stabilize again, but we're not there now. So I'll give you a little bit more background about what's going on and kind of some steps that I took, because as I shared it over on social media, I guess it occurred to me that there's value in talking about this and a process that I went through. I know I'm not the only one that hits up against many of the gaps in our current medical system. So without giving a full medical history of my son, back in early March, there were some issues popping up that we had not noticed before and continued into early April, to the extent that one of his practitioners and I said, I think we need to take him to the emergency room just to make sure that this isn't something more serious based on the nature of what we were seeing. It could be a series of things, which could be quite serious. So we went to the ED. We did the whole ED thing. We sat, we waited, we tested, we scanned, and they turned us away saying, well, we don't know, but it looks like he's okay for now. And so that at the time was good enough for me. And so I went, walking out tired. I think it was I don't remember, 2:00 in the morning, and got some Jack in the Box, and my goodness, that was good. Okay. I don't eat gluten though, so I did have a headache the next day, which was a bummer, but I don't know, borderline worth it because that was delicious. Okay. Where were we? I got distracted remembering that beautiful chicken sandwich. So we went and we played the referral game, or what I call the referral game, which is go to a specialist. They don't know what it is. They refer you to another. You call to get into the specialist and you wait anywhere from weeks to months to get in. And after playing that game for a while, clearly it didn't work. I had to really move through a lot of emotions during this process. A lot of anger, a lot of fear, a lot of hopelessness, and a lot of confusion. And so I got to the point, I guess this would be several weeks ago now, that I really said, I cannot continue this way. I cannot continue to allow this to happen to my son. And so that Saturday morning, I think this was on Friday, that I really got clear what I needed to do. And that Saturday morning, we had already had a scheduled MRI. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to pack lunches. We're going to stay for the day. We're going to have a day trip to the hospital, and we're not going to leave until we get access to the people that we need to get access to that can help my son. We're not going to play the system game anymore. That was my plan. And I went through different waves of confidence in this plan. In certain times on Friday, I was definitely felt like, man, I am the leader of a warrior troop and we're going to conquer. And then sometimes I could kind of project and see staff rolling their eyes at me and thinking, who does this lady think she is? I had to move through a lot of this and, allow my confidence to waver, but ultimately to lean on my commitment to getting my son the help he needed. And let's be honest, to getting me the help we needed, because our whole family was taking a hit because of all that we were doing to try to find help. It really increased the amount of appointments we were doing. It just really was a load that our whole family was carrying. So we got to the ED, we expected to wait. And that actually helps you get into a different mind frame. When you expect to wait, for me, it just is I can wait forever as long as I know I'm there. I think I was able to go in with that mindset, so it didn't feel as excruciating as it might sound to some people. Because we waited all day. Of course, we waited and we got labs and we did different tests throughout the day. But ultimately, emergency room doctors, their job is to figure out what's wrong with you and to get you out of the ER, either by way of admittance or by sending you on your way to the next doctor who's kind of your long-term care. He kind of came back in the room after many hours and said, I don't really see anything. I don't see anything more than anybody else saw. Clearly, he had a lot of records to look through with everything that we had been doing. So we kind of got to that point in the conversation where he was going to say, hey, so see you later. He was going to say it in a little different language, but for me, that was where I was just so clear. Then I just had to tell him, look, I understand that's where you're at, but I need your help. I need you to get me to the people that can help Levi. And, several times he would kind of go into, well, I don't know what else I can do here for you. Or I don't remember exactly what he said, but essentially he was saying a version of no. And so this is where I really just had to be very committed to what we were there for. And to me, again, that was to get him help. So I just repeated several different times to many different people, we can't go on like this. I have to get Levi help. My job as his mom is to get him what he needs. And he's not getting it outside of the hospital, outside of the system. And so I need your help to get him help. And I think at a certain point, it became abundantly clear to them that they were not going to move my opinion on this. So actually, we had an MRI scheduled for 5:00 that day. So we're kind of waiting for that. And then we were waiting. And that 5:00 turned into 7:45. We were finally over in the MRI room. And so I think the MRI was supposed to be an hour and a half. So we go in there, and the way it works for us is that Levi is able to go in unsedated, but he likes to have me sit in the room with him just so he has some assurance that everything's going to be okay. So he's over there in the MRI room. I'm in the corner, huddled with a book and a blanket, and kind of ready to bunker down for an hour and a half. I was very surprised when I got out of the MRI room and they're like, wow, you guys were in there for 3 hours. And I look at the clock actually, because you don't have any electronics in there. You have no watch, no phone, and there's no clock. So it's this weird time warp experience in addition to kind of how I think the hospital is in general, where it's like you really lose sense of time. And it was just, I was like grabbing my watch and like trying to register. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think it was like 11:20 when we got out. And I was like, wait, what? Like that was crazy. We continued to go back to the ED to kind of figure out what's next. And I was trying to get my phone back from the nurse's station because they were supposed to be charging it for me. And they accidentally messed up. And so I was like looking at her like with desperation. I think I had like 5% left on my phone. And she said, oh, well, it looks like you guys are getting admitted anyhow. And so I said, oh, okay, well, that's news to me. So that was where I'm like, okay, I guess that's the next step. And so I quickly, with the ability I had left, I called my husband to let him know what was happening and prepared for the next step, which was admittance. So I won't go into more and more details, but basically that was something that, has been a huge focus, getting my son the care he needs. And so we were inpatient for, I think, 5 days total. It's funny to me because like the diagnosis he left is not like, wow, like I can't believe he has this thing. It's like not a major thing for most people. He clearly has a different body and different needs than other people. But to me, I'm like, this is kind of funny that we were in the hospital 5 days for this. Anyhow, it just shows you how complicated my darling is. But long story short, we got the help we needed. And again, inpatient, they would kind of look at me because we were in the hospital and like we were not your average hospital patient at this point because we weren't there for rehab. We were there very unmedically escalated, if you will, in terms of like he didn't have any machines. He didn't have any of the things that you normally do in the hospital. He did have an IV, but that's just kind of their standard protocol. Different doctors that would come online would be like, so why are you guys here? And I would just explain to them, hey, like we need to figure out what's going on and we need to leave with a plan. And I was just had to repeat, I am not relieving with a referral because that's not working. And I think people like I could pick up on like, they're like, oh yeah, that doesn't really work. We know it, but we don't know how to fix it. Because clearly the doctors are not the people at fault for this. They're inside of this broken system as well. Mission accomplished. I got my son the help he needed, at least to get to that next stage. Now, did it magically get all better when we left the hospital? No. So we're still in a hard season. I would say we got what we needed there. We got the next step, but it's still kind of rough over here. So is that a justification for why this is a rebroadcast? No. But I did think that it would be helpful to kind of give some context and just share, where I'm at. And I love this podcast. I love creating it. And it never really feels heavy for me. And I have to be honest with myself and say, you know what, Kara, like, I don't know that you have capacity to do all the things that you want to do right now. And so this is me letting go just a little bit. And I did consider like and give myself permission. Like I cannot publish. That's okay. People can do that. But clearly I've not missed a week over the last, I don't know, what are we at? Over 3 years now. And so it's important to me to show up regularly. I guess it's a commitment to myself and to y'all. So here we are. And I want to tell you a little bit about this rebroadcast or this episode that originally aired way back in November of 2020. This was the 11th episode. So it was early on. And why this one? Well, it's probably the episode that I refer to the most. It comes up, the concepts I'm talking about in this episode, over and over again. Everywhere, not just with special needs moms. This is kind of a human thing, maybe a mom thing. And the episode is called The Deathly Traps of Pain Comparison. And if you're like, well, what's pain comparison? These are all the times that you or somebody else prefaces what they're saying with, I know this isn't that big of a deal, or I know people have it worse, Or, oh gosh, it's not as big of a deal as what you're going through, but, right? Do you see all those disqualifiers? Those are some of the ways that we compare our pain to another in a way that disqualifies it. I hear it all the time. And I won't go into it now because I do go into the episode of like why this is valuable to address. And even though it's kind of a small thing, if you think about it, it's like this little disclaimer, like this thing that we do, maybe even just in our heads. It's not like this huge monumental thing, but it has a big impact on our experience, on our ability to feel and process our own pain. Okay, so listen to this episode and enjoy this episode and let me know what you take from it. I'll see you over on the social media. I'm at the Special Needs Mom podcast if you're not following it. And I hope that if you're in summer, you're doing okay. And if you're like me and you're in the last week of school and just barely hanging on, I hope you're doing okay too. All right, we'll see you next week. Today, we're going to be talking about pain and struggle comparison. And here's a little example of what I mean. So the basic premise of this conversation is that there's no competition for who has it worse. However, we often operate like there is. It's often when I share our story, which is that my son was diagnosed 9 years ago when he was 2 with a brain tumor, that people will compare their experience, which in many cases, certainly not all, will not, in their opinion, be as bad as a brain tumor diagnosis. I feel like brain tumor is the kind of diagnosis where when people are trying to make you feel better for having something pretty bad, people say, well, at least it's not a brain tumor. And I'm laughing, but it's really not that funny. When I'm talking to friends, sometimes they'll say stuff like, well, I mean, it's nothing in comparison to what you have going on, but, and then they'll share their experience. Or they'll put some caveat that because in their narrative, their diagnosis or situation isn't as bad as something else, that they should or shouldn't feel a certain way. I often hear things like this because I feel like brain tumor is one of those diagnoses where it's just one of those ones that I think we use as a little bit of a hyperbole, where when you're trying to make someone feel better for having any diagnosis, you can say something like, well, at least it's not a brain tumor. And the intention is to kind of put things in perspective. However, as we'll discuss further today, it doesn't always work. I mean, maybe sometimes it does, but I'd say more often than not, it doesn't work. So a lot of times we will tell ourselves that we have no right to complain or be upset about our certain circumstance because somebody else has it worse. Or we find ourselves really confused at why we feel so bad when we don't necessarily have that horrible of a diagnosis or situation we're dealing with. So why do we have this little ranking system? Why have we come up with this? Well, I think the first reason is I think we're trying to make ourselves feel better. We think that by comparing our pain or our situation to somebody else's in a way that has ours be better than, it's going to make us feel better. And maybe sometimes it does. But I would say that a lot of times it's a way we're trying to find gratitude, but that is not necessarily gratitude at all. And so I'd say more often than not, we don't feel better when we compare because we still are left with whatever circumstance and feeling that we have as a result of it. And so therefore, it doesn't necessarily matter that it's not a brain tumor, and it doesn't necessarily matter that it's not as bad as somebody else's. It's still bad in our experience of it. The other reason I think we use this little ranking system is that we have ways that we think we should act in our society. We kind of want to be what people expect us to be. We want to fit in. And part of the way that we do this is that we have what we would consider a right way of responding or an expected way. And so when we experience anything, let's just say an ear infection, we expect ourselves not to make a big deal of it, and we expect ourselves to react in a certain way. And if you find yourself having a different reaction than what is expected, it oftentimes can lead to judgment of why are you acting this way when you shouldn't. And I've talked about this in the show before, but judgment pretty much just kills a lot of our experience. It shuts us down. I guess that's what I'm looking to say. It shuts us down in a way that's not usually helpful. I know that when I found myself with the diagnosis of brain tumor, I went to try to find something worse than, well, at least he didn't die, was all I could come up with. And I didn't feel better at all. It actually made me feel worse because I felt like I should feel good based on the gratitude that he didn't die. But as we'll get into in a second, we'll realize it didn't give me any space to actually acknowledge the experience that really sucked and I wasn't grateful for. And I didn't even want to be grateful for. Like, in no circumstance am I ever thankful for a brain tumor. And I think that's what happens when we conflate this idea of pain or struggle comparison, is we start to look at things with a single lens. We are grateful for everything or nothing at all. And I want to look at 4 specific reasons of why pain comparison is hurting you today. The first one I touched on earlier is that minimizing your pain is not a form of gratitude. So telling yourself that you shouldn't hurt or that you shouldn't hurt as much as you are is not gratitude. And that's what we're doing when we're comparing our pain to somebody else's. It's a way of saying, well, you shouldn't hurt because at least it's not that. Or you shouldn't hurt because it's not that big of a deal. Do you ever notice saying that to yourself? Oh, it's not that big of a deal. Why are you so worried? So gratitude is actually, I looked it up. It's the quality of being thankful. It's readiness to show appreciation for and to return kindness. Gratitude can exist alongside anything. You don't have to be thankful for the thing that has you really sad. You can be thankful for other things. Do you see how it's different? It's not thankful or grateful or having gratitude for everything all at one time and having it either be wholly good or wholly bad. It's actually being able to hold some things that you're grateful for and allow the other things, like maybe your pain, as something that you're experiencing. And you probably aren't grateful for it at the time. You might decide you're going to be grateful for it later. That often happens. Like, there's a lot I can be grateful for in the journey we've had. But I would not say at the time I was yet ready to be grateful for them when we were going through some of the hardest times. The second thing is that your pain deserves space. Here's the thing. You are the only person that can give it space. And the consequence of telling yourself that you shouldn't feel the way you feel, it creates sort of a dam, a stopping of the flow of emotions. See, emotions are just vibrations in our body. Energy, if you will. Not to get woo-woo, but it actually, the way that we experience feeling is through different little nerves in our body reacting in a certain way. And our body has all sorts of pre-programmed reactions to things. Like for me, a good example is, when you come into a close call in a car, I know for me that quick jolt of adrenaline results in like the top of my legs feeling really prickly. And of course that heartbeat fluttering really fast. That's the feeling for me of fear. Fear that I almost died or that I thought I was going to die or thought I was going to get really hurt. That's one example of what it's like to have a sensation in your body. That's a feeling, an emotion. Pain is just a broad term for any type of emotion that you would consider unpleasant. And it needs space, just as much space as all the pleasant emotions that we have. And just as a reiteration, you're the only person that can give it space. And when you compare your struggle or pain, that is a way of not giving it space. It's actually a way of trying to step over and to tell yourself that you don't deserve the space because it's not that big a deal. Or at least it's not this. The third reason why the pain comparison is hurting you is that there's enough to go around. And this does relate to number 2, so maybe I could have done just 2 points or 3 points, but I wanted to distinguish this one. I think we think of this in a little funky way, that allowing your pain space doesn't take away from other people's ability to feel pain or hurt. It's almost like we operate like there's a pie of pain, and that if we take too much, others won't get what they deserve based on the criteria that we've decided on whether their pain is less than or greater than ours. Do you see how that is, right? So if imagine this pie, and there's 6 pieces in the pie. If you take a piece, or maybe it's not 6 pieces. Let's just say there's a pie and you take too big of a piece because you're having a really hard time with anything, that there's something that you feel is wrong about that. It's taking too much. And I think a lot of times we also then say, well, then other people won't have enough. Well, consider that there's plenty of pain to go around. You guys are like, wow, she's losing it. No. But for me, this was actually really important. And to recognize that there's no upside to devaluing your own experience. And this can be for pain or for pleasant or unpleasant feelings. Like, what if you allowed yourself to be devastated about your child having to take medication? Let's just say it's for behavioral control, so it's not life-saving, but it really bummed you out. It really had you discouraged, or it had you fearful. And it would be really easy to go and compare that to a child that has to take life-saving medication every day. And to say, well, why are you so upset about this? This is not a big deal. But what if you actually allowed yourself to just feel devastated because you can, and you are? And that actually pushing down your experience doesn't help anybody else. And the fourth thing is that we're all different. We all have different circumstances and life experiences, and therefore we're all going to have different ways of relating to those. So one person can have a diagnosis, and I'm not going to give any names just because I don't want it to be about that. So let's just say diagnosis A. And some people would breeze through it. Not a big deal. Don't even tell their parents. And other people might be devastated. They might feel like their world stopped. And it doesn't mean somebody's right and somebody's wrong about this. All it means is that they have a different way of processing that information. They have a different conclusion on what that particular diagnosis or situation means. And I'm using diagnosis. It doesn't have to be diagnosis. It can be an experience at school. So if your child's having a certain experience at school, you can easily have that mean something and therefore have a feeling about it. And it may be very different than how another mom might handle it. And I think we're so tempted to look at how other people handle things and have that mean we're supposed to do it the same way. And I just want to point out to not use your life experience against yourself. You're going to handle it exactly how you handle it. Have your own back. So I wanted to give a couple places to look if you notice that you do struggle with pain comparison, or also we could call it pain devaluation. Here's some helpful questions for you to process. These will be in the show notes if you want to look them up, if you're driving or walking or something. These would be great journaling ones. What if you didn't use others to decide how you should or shouldn't feel? Just kind of explore. What if you were able to look inward and to not feel how you should feel, but feel how you actually feel? Another question is, if you experience fully the sadness, frustration, anger, shame, whatever it is that's coming up for you, what does that allow in your life? What's the downside? What's the upside? And if at this point you're like, Kara, I thought this podcast was going to be fun, and you're talking about pain and comparison and like some serious stuff, you're right. The reason I want to talk about this is because if you are like a lot of people that I come across and are having a really hard time feeling the positive feelings in your life, it's very likely that at some point, whether it has to do with pain comparison or something else, it might be an indication that you've stopped this river of feeling in your body. That you're actually actively trying to either avoid or resist, or in some cases react to the feelings instead of feeling them. It's super common, especially when it comes to these unpleasant feelings. And avoiding things can look like going to your phone instead of being present in the moment. It can look like that big overreaction when you yell at your kids, almost like you're demon possessed and like there's something else inside of you that's coming out. Not that I've ever done that. Just kidding. I have. Okay. So anyhow, a lot of us moms have, and it's not my proudest moment, but I fully recognize that it's from unprocessed emotion that I was literally resisting and avoiding and trying to keep stuff down in there. It was maybe at times I didn't know how to process it. And so it finds a way to come out, and we see this reaction. We see this inability to actually stuff it down any longer, and it comes exploding out. So I have a little activity for you. I want you to think of the littlest thing that you noticed or you learned recently about your child. Get it in your head. Do you have it? For me, something over this last week was that his skin on his face had several different odd things going on. Like he kept getting these zit-like things. He's not yet in puberty. So it didn't really make sense. And they kind of kept popping up and going away. And for me, it brought up thought of maybe I'm missing something, or maybe there's something under the surface that's about to erupt. And maybe this is a sign that he has some virus festering and something bad's going to happen. And of course, in our case, I have all sorts of like history to go off of how things can go bad real fast. So I ended up feeling really anxious. And so for me, the first step in that was actually just to stop and acknowledge of why I was feeling so anxious. I was feeling anxious because I saw these things on my son's head, and they made me think that something could happen to him again. And for me just to allow that anxiety to be there was the most loving thing I could do for myself at that point. So I want you to go back to the thing that you thought of. What's the littlest thing that you noticed or learned recently about your child? So I want you to see, what does it bring up for you? Does it make you think that you're not doing enough? Does it make you worry about your child's future? Does it make you wonder what other people are thinking or get you upset about what you think they're thinking? Could be a lot of different things. And I want you just to notice and to allow the thing to be as big or as small as you want it to be. To not shut it down because it's not that big of a deal or that it could be worse. Notice if you want to devalue it or shut it down. What if you let it be a big deal for you? So as we wrap up, I know this was not a giggly episode. And here's the reason why. Because this is the pathway to what we want more of in our life. And if it doesn't make sense to you, if you're still kind of shaking your head or like scratching your head, I guess would be, reach out. Let me know if you have any questions. I would be so honored to support you as you continue to process this episode, as you process your life, and as you ask yourself for more. As you ask yourself for more of the life that you want to experience, I would be honored to help you. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much. So there you have it. That's the end of our show for today, and I'm so glad you were with us. I have one quick favor to ask you. It is the request to subscribe and to share. And of course, please leave your feedback. I want to hear from you. I want to know more of what you want, more of what helped you, and of course, more of what touched you. See you next time. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes, get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes, get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.